3 millennia, the pharaohs of ancient Egypt sought a single, burning goal: immortality. Yet among them, one ruler dared to dream bigger than all the rest. His name was Ramses II, remembered as Ramses the Great. He reigned for 66 years, erected monuments that defied nature, and carved his image into stone with a defiance against death itself. This is the story of a man who turned himself into a legend, an eternal king who refused to be forgotten. Born around 1300 BC in a land already old with history, Ramses was the son of Pharaoh Seti I. From childhood, he was groomed not just to rule, but to embody divine power. His tutors filled him with tales of gods and kings. His father placed him at the head of armies while still a teenager. To his people, he was not simply a prince. He was destiny walking, a living promise that Egypt would never fade. Unlike other pharaohs, Ramses lived long enough to transform his ambition into stone and memory. He commanded armies that clashed with the mighty Hittites, oversaw vast building projects that reshaped the Nile Valley, and filled the desert with temples whose size defied imagination. To his enemies, he was a conqueror. To his people, a god among men. Ramses the Great was not merely a ruler of Egypt, he sought to rule time itself. As crown prince, Ramses was thrust into the chaos of war. His father Seti I placed him in command of campaigns against Nubia and Libya, testing his resolve on the battlefield. The young prince rode his chariot into storms of arrows, his presence rallying Egyptian soldiers. Victories came swiftly, and stories spread of a fearless warrior who fought like Horus himself. The desert winds carried his name, and already Egypt whispered of a future king. When Seti I died, the throne passed to his son. Ramses was no longer the fiery prince, he was pharaoh. Crowned under the gaze of the gods, he wore the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt. The coronation was not just a political ritual, but a divine transformation. To the people, Ramses became the living Horus, chosen by Ra to maintain Ma'at, cosmic balance. His reign began with the weight of eternity pressing on his shoulders. From the very beginning of his reign, Ramses sought to outshine all who came before him. He launched ambitious building projects, ordered colossal statues of himself carved across Egypt, and restored temples that had fallen into ruin. Wherever one traveled along the Nile, his face emerged in stone, immortalized in colossal form. To friend and foe alike, the message was clear. Egypt had a king whose name would endure for all ages. In 1274 BC, Ramses faced the might of the Hittite Empire at Kadesh, in modern-day Syria. It was one of the largest chariot battles the world had ever seen. The pharaoh rode at the front, his golden chariot thundering across the plain. Trapped by ambush, he stood alone with only his bodyguard. Yet, according to Egyptian accounts, Ramses charged into thousands of enemies, scattering them like dust before the storm. The outcome of Kadesh was uncertain. Both Egyptians and Hittites claimed victory. Yet Ramses turned this stalemate into triumph through propaganda. He ordered the story carved into the walls of temples, showing himself as the invincible warrior chosen by the gods. Across Egypt, reliefs depicted him drawing his bow, larger than life, while enemies cowered before his might. Through stone and story, the pharaoh ensured his glory would outlive the truth. But Kadesh also brought something unprecedented, the world's first known peace treaty. After years of conflict, Ramses and the Hittite king Hattusili III signed an agreement carved into clay tablets and temple walls. It promised peace, alliance, and even arranged royal marriages. This treaty not only ended decades of bloodshed, but also elevated Ramses' status as both warrior and peacemaker, an image he carefully cultivated for eternity. Ramses understood that stone was stronger than memory. To be eternal, he covered Egypt with monuments. The most spectacular was Abu Simbel, carved directly into the mountainside of Nubia. 4 colossal statues of the pharaoh, each over 20 meters high, guard the temple entrance. Their stern faces gaze forever at the rising sun, a message of power to both Egyptians and foreigners. Here sat a god among men. Inside, walls blaze with scenes of divine battles and eternal rituals. Reliefs show Ramses smiting enemies, crowned by gods Amun and Ra. At the back lies the sanctuary, where statues of the pharaoh sit beside the gods, equal in size and divinity. Twice a year, the sun's rays pierce the darkness, illuminating his face, an engineered miracle designed to bind heaven and earth in his honor. But Abu Simbel was only one masterpiece. In Thebes, Ramesses built the Ramesseum, his mortuary temple, filled with colossal statues and vast courtyards. Today its ruins still speak of grandeur. In Karnak, he expanded the hypostyle hall, where 134 giant columns rise like a stone forest. And in Luxor, massive statues of the pharaoh once lined the entrance, reminding every visitor that Ramesses was more than king. He was Egypt itself. Beside his own temple, Ramesses built another wonder, the smaller Abu Simbel temple, dedicated to Hathor, goddess of love, and to his beloved wife, Queen Nefertari. This was unprecedented. For the first time in Egyptian history, a queen was honored with a monument equal in scale to the pharaoh. On its facade, Nefertari stands beside Ramesses, carved at the same towering height, an unmistakable symbol of her unique place in his heart and in the kingdom. Ramesses' devotion went further. In the Valley of the Queens, he ordered a tomb for Nefertari so magnificent it is still called the Sistine Chapel of ancient Egypt. Its walls blaze with vibrant colors preserved after more than 3,000 years. Frescoes show the queen guided by gods like Isis and Nephthys through the underworld, until she is reborn as divine. Every detail was a declaration of eternal love. For Ramesses, Nefertari was more than a queen. She was the embodiment of harmony and divine beauty. In statues, she is often shown the same size as the pharaoh, breaking tradition where queens were always smaller. This equality carved in stone revealed both his love and his strategy. By elevating Nefertari, he elevated himself, showing Egypt and the world that even the gods walked beside him. Ramesses II was not only a builder, but also a warrior. His most famous battle was against the Hittites at Kadesh, around 1274 BC. Both empires fought for control of Syria, the bridge between East and West. Ramesses led one of the largest armies Egypt had ever assembled, with chariots, archers, and infantry marching in thousands across the desert. At first, Ramesses was deceived by false reports and marched into a trap. The Hittite chariots, swift and deadly, thundered down upon his camp, scattering his men. For a moment, it seemed the pharaoh's ambition would end in disaster. Surrounded, he stood at the center of chaos, his army breaking apart around him. But Ramesses refused to fall. Standing tall in his chariot, he rallied his men, charging directly into the Hittite ranks. The inscriptions later carved in stone claimed he fought like a lion, striking fear into his enemies. Whether exaggerated or not, his courage stabilized the army, turning panic into resistance. The battle raged with no clear victor. Thousands lay dead across the field. Neither the Egyptians nor the Hittites could claim true triumph. But what followed was more remarkable than the clash itself. Ramesses and the Hittite king eventually signed what is known as the world's first recorded peace treaty, carved on temple walls for eternity. Beyond the battlefield, Ramesses II's true obsession was immortality. He poured his wealth and power into monuments meant to defy time itself. At Karnak, he expanded the hypostyle hall, a forest of 134 giant columns rising like stone trees toward the heavens. Walking through them, one feels small, as if entering the very house of the gods. In Luxor, Ramesses placed colossal statues of himself at the temple entrance. 4 seated, 2 standing, each one a silent guardian of eternity. The walls bore scenes of his greatest triumph, the Battle of Kadesh, carved not as mere history, but as eternal propaganda, proof to gods and men alike that Ramesses was chosen to rule forever. His most breathtaking creation was Abu Simbel, 4 colossal statues of the pharaoh, each more than 20 meters tall, carved into the mountain. Twice a year, on specific days, the rising sun penetrated the temple, illuminating the sanctuary deep inside. It was not just architecture, it was magic, a cosmic alignment declaring Ramesses eternal. When the Aswan Dam threatened Abu Simbel in the 1960s, the world united to save it. Engineers cut the temple into 1,000 blocks and moved it higher, preserving the miracle. Even today, the sun's rays still reach the sanctuary, a testament not only to Ramesses' vision, but to humanity's determination to protect his eternal dream. But Ramesses was not only a conqueror or builder, he was also a man deeply in love. His beloved queen, Nefertari, held a place in his heart unlike any other. To honor her, he built a smaller but equally magnificent temple at Abu Simbel, where Nefertari stood carved beside him as an equal, the first time a queen was given such divine recognition. In the Valley of the Queens, he gave her the most exquisite tomb ever created in Egypt. Nefertari's resting place, QV66, glows with vivid colors even today. Painted walls show her journey into the afterlife, guided by Isis, Hathor, and Nephthys, until she stands reborn as a goddess beside Osiris. Every detail reflects not only devotion, but eternal love. Ramesses and Nefertari's love story remains carved in stone, echoing across millennia. In a world of pharaohs and gods, he dared to immortalize not just his own glory, but the woman who shared his throne and his soul. To stand before her tomb is to feel the whisper of an eternal bond. Ramesses' ambition reached beyond temples and tombs. He dreamed of building a new city, a capital that would reflect his power and vision. This city was Pi-Ramesses, House of Ramesses. Located in the Nile Delta, it stretched across nearly 30 square kilometers, rivaling even the great cities of the ancient world. Pi-Ramesses was more than a royal residence. It was a military hub filled with stables for thousands of horses and chariots. It was an economic center, controlling trade routes that linked Egypt to Syria, Mesopotamia, and even distant lands like Afghanistan. For decades, Pi-Ramesses stood as the beating heart of an empire. But the glory of Pi-Ramesses was not eternal. In time, political and religious struggles shifted Egypt's power. Stones from the city were stripped to build a new capital at Tanis. What once stood as a jewel of Egyptian civilization was buried under farmlands, its ruins forgotten until rediscovered by modern archaeology. In the 5th year of his reign, Ramesses faced one of the greatest challenges of his life, the Hittite Empire. Their clash would culminate in the legendary Battle of Kadesh, fought on the banks of the Orontes River in modern-day Syria. It was one of the largest chariot battles in history, with over 5,000 war chariots thundering across the field. Ramesses was caught off guard by a Hittite ambush. His army was scattered, and the Egyptian camp nearly overrun. In that desperate moment, Ramesses himself seized the reins. Leading his bodyguard and a small contingent of troops, he charged into the heart of the Hittite lines, rallying his men with unmatched courage. Though neither side achieved a decisive victory, Ramesses proclaimed himself triumphant. On temple walls, he immortalized scenes of his bravery, showing himself as the lone hero who turned the tide of battle. The truth was more complex, but the story carved in stone made Ramesses a godlike warrior in the eyes of his people. After years of stalemate with the Hittites, Ramesses chose diplomacy over endless war. Around 1259 BC, he signed the world's first known peace treaty with King Hattusili III of the Hittite Empire. The treaty was engraved on silver tablets, pledging eternal peace, military alliance, and even mutual aid against future enemies. The treaty not only ended hostilities but also sealed ties through marriage. Ramesses married a Hittite princess, strengthening bonds between the two powers. This political alliance brought stability to the region and allowed Ramesses to focus on monumental building projects in Egypt. The Peace Treaty of Kadesh is remembered as a turning point in world history. Today, a replica of the treaty can be seen at the United Nations headquarters in New York, symbolizing humanity's timeless hope for peace. It stands as proof that even in an age of conquest, diplomacy could prevail. Freed from the constant threat of war, Ramesses turned his energy to monuments that would outlast the ages. The most famous of these is Abu Simbel, carved into a sandstone cliff along the Nile. Its facade towers 33 meters high, guarded by 4 colossal statues of the pharaoh, each more than 20 meters tall. The interior of Abu Simbel reveals halls and sanctuaries decorated with scenes of battle and divine worship. Deep within lies the Holy Chamber, where statues of Ra-Horakhti, Amun, Ptah, and Ramesses himself sit side by side, affirming his eternal status as both king and god. But Abu Simbel was only one jewel in Ramesses' crown. In Thebes, he expanded the grand temples of Karnak and Luxor. At Karnak, he completed the hypostyle hall, a forest of 134 colossal columns that seemed to touch the heavens. At Luxor, his statues once lined the entrance, towering over all who entered. To ensure his memory lived forever, Ramesses built his own mortuary temple, the Ramesseum. Though now in ruins, its remains still inspire awe. Colossal statues, immense pylons, and inscriptions boasting of his divine power. Ancient poets called it the House of Millions of Years, a temple designed to outlast time itself. Beside Ramesses, one figure shines with extraordinary brilliance: his beloved queen, Nefertari. For her, he commissioned one of the most beautiful monuments in Egypt, the smaller temple at Abu Simbel, dedicated to Hathor and to Nefertari herself. In an unprecedented gesture, he placed her statues the same size as his own. Nefertari's tomb, discovered in the Valley of the Queens, is often called the most beautiful in Egypt. Its walls still glow with vibrant colors, depicting the queen's journey into the afterlife. Guided by Isis and Nephthys, she is shown becoming divine, joining Osiris in eternal life. The love story of Ramesses and Nefertari is carved into stone across Egypt. In inscriptions, he calls her the one for whom the sun shines. Unlike many royal marriages that were purely political, theirs radiated affection and devotion, making Nefertari not just a queen but an eternal partner. Ramesses the Great dreamed not only of temples but of an entire new capital. He built Ramesses, the House of Ramesses, in the Nile Delta. Covering more than 30 square kilometers, it rivaled Rome in size centuries later. This city became the beating heart of his empire, a symbol of his ambition to rule forever. Why here? The choice was strategic. From Ramesses, the pharaoh could launch campaigns into the Levant and control vital trade routes linking Egypt to Syria, Mesopotamia, and beyond. It was both a political statement and a military stronghold, ensuring his presence was felt across borders. Archaeologists describe Ramesses as a city of marvels. Temples, palaces, gardens, and stables for thousands of horses filled its landscape. The city housed one of the greatest chariotry centers of the ancient world, where military power and divine glory were displayed side by side. In 1274 BC, Ramesses II faced one of the most legendary battles of the ancient world, Kadesh. Determined to expand Egypt's influence into Syria, he marched north with an army of over 20,000 men, the largest force Egypt had ever assembled. But the Hittites, masters of Anatolia, were waiting. Their king Muwatalli II had gathered a coalition of allies, boasting an army even larger than Egypt's. The fate of the Near East hung in the balance as two superpowers prepared to clash. At first, Ramesses was caught off guard. Hittite chariots struck with devastating force, crushing his advance. For a moment, it seemed the Great Pharaoh might fall, surrounded by enemies with no escape. But Ramesses refused to surrender. Standing tall in his chariot, he rallied his men with courage and fury. His counterattack broke through the Hittite lines, turning the tide of the battle. The Battle of Kadesh ended in a stalemate, neither side victorious. But Ramesses ensured his story would be told as a triumph. On temple walls across Egypt, he carved his image as the fearless warrior who stood against impossible odds. After years of fighting, both Egypt and the Hittites realized they could not destroy one another. The cost was too high, the blood too much. So in a moment unprecedented in human history, they chose diplomacy over war. In 1259 BC, Ramesses II and Hittite king Hattusili III signed what is considered the world's first recorded peace treaty. The agreement promised mutual defense, no further aggression, and eternal brotherhood between the two great powers. The treaty was carved into temple walls in both languages, Egyptian hieroglyphs and Hittite cuneiform. A message to the world: peace could be stronger than war, and even the mightiest kings could lay down their swords. To seal the peace, Ramesses even married a Hittite princess. Their union symbolized not just the end of war, but the birth of a new era, one where love and alliance replaced endless bloodshed. Ramesses II was not content with military glory alone. He knew true immortality came not from victories, but from stone. From Karnak to Luxor, from Abu Simbel to his Ramesseum, he covered Egypt with monuments that proclaimed his name. At Abu Simbel, 4 towering statues of the pharaoh guard the entrance. each over 20 meters tall. To stand before them is to feel small, insignificant, as if Ramesses himself still watches from eternity. In Luxor, massive pylons were adorned with scenes of the Battle of Kadesh. Even in stone, Ramesses cast himself as victor, the chosen of the gods, smiting his enemies before the eyes of Amun. His mortuary temple, the Ramesseum, once held a 1,000-ton statue of the pharaoh. Today, its ruins lie scattered, yet they whisper of a king who sought to defy time itself. But Ramesses' quest for eternity was not his alone. His queen, Nefertari, shared his glory and his love. To her, he dedicated a temple beside his own at Abu Simbel, a gesture unprecedented in Egyptian history. In the Valley of the Queens, he built for her the most exquisite tomb of the necropolis. The walls still shimmer with vibrant colors, showing Nefertari's journey to the afterlife, guided by Isis, Hathor, and Nephthys. The love of Ramesses for Nefertari was immortalized in every inscription. In some, she appears the same size as the king, a sign of her unmatched importance, rare in the ancient world. Her tomb, discovered in 1904, still takes the breath of those who enter. It is more than a burial site. It is a love letter, carved and painted in stone, from the most powerful pharaoh to the queen he adored. Beyond Abu Simbel, Ramesses left his mark in Thebes, in the sacred complexes of Karnak and Luxor. These temples were not only monuments, they were cosmic machines designed to link gods, kings, and eternity. At Karnak, the great hypostyle hall rises with 134 colossal columns, each soaring 24 meters high. The play of shadow and sunlight created a sacred theater, where worshippers felt the very presence of the gods. Ramesses expanded this sacred landscape, carving his victories and his image upon the walls. At Luxor, the temple's entrance once stood flanked by 6 colossal statues of the king, guardians of his eternal glory. Here, the festival of Opet united Amun, Mut, and Khonsu in a divine procession. From Karnak to Luxor, sacred barges carried the gods across the Nile, renewing the bond between heaven, earth, and the king. One of Ramesses' most famous legacies is the Battle of Kadesh, fought around 1274 BC against the Hittites. It was not only a clash of armies, but also one of the greatest propaganda campaigns in history. According to Ramesses' inscriptions, he charged into battle single-handedly, surrounded by thousands of enemies, and turned the tide with divine courage. In reality, the outcome was closer to a stalemate. Nevertheless, Ramesses ensured that every temple wall proclaimed his victory. From Abu Simbel to Luxor, carvings glorified him as the chosen of Amun, the invincible warrior who crushed his foes. But Kadesh also gave the world something greater, the first known peace treaty in history. After years of fighting, Ramesses and the Hittite king Hattusili III agreed to a pact of non-aggression and mutual defense. Among Ramesses' many wives, one held a special place, Queen Nefertari. Their love story transcended politics, immortalized in temples and tombs as one of the greatest romances of the ancient world. To honor her, Ramesses built the small temple at Abu Simbel, dedicated to Hathor and Nefertari. It was the first time in Egyptian history that a queen's likeness was carved the same size as the pharaoh's. Nefertari's tomb in the Valley of the Queens is often called the Sistine Chapel of ancient Egypt. Its walls glow with vivid paintings depicting her journey through the afterlife, guided by Isis, Hathor, and Osiris. For Ramesses, Nefertari was not just a queen, she was his eternal companion. Her presence beside him in monuments across Egypt ensured that their love would be remembered for millennia. Ramesses II was not only a warrior and a lover, but also one of history's greatest builders. His vision transformed Egypt into a kingdom of monuments, where stone spoke louder than words. At Karnak, he expanded the already magnificent hypostyle hall, filling it with colossal columns that still inspire awe today. Each pillar carried inscriptions proclaiming his divine power and military victories. In Luxor, Ramesses left his mark at the temple's grand entrance. Massive statues of the pharaoh once lined the gateway, while battle reliefs immortalized his legendary victory at Kadesh. Perhaps his most personal creation was the Ramesseum, his mortuary temple. Built as a house of eternity, it displayed colossal statues, some weighing over 1,000 tons, symbolizing his defiance of time itself. Among all his exploits, one event stood out above the rest: the Battle of Kadesh. It was 1274 BC, and Ramses II led Egypt's armies north to face the mighty Hittite Empire in one of history's earliest recorded battles. The clash began with a devastating ambush. The Hittites stormed the Egyptian camp with chariots, catching Ramses' army off guard. Chaos and destruction swept through the desert sands. In the chaos, Ramses himself fought with unmatched courage. Mounted on his chariot, he charged straight into the Hittite forces, rallying his men with fearless determination. The battle ended in a stalemate. Neither side claimed a decisive victory, yet Ramses carved the story into Egypt's temples, ensuring that history remembered him as the triumphant hero of Kadesh. From the ashes of war, diplomacy arose. Ramses and the Hittite king signed what is considered the world's first peace treaty, an agreement that promised mutual respect and alliance between their empires. After years of war, the clash with the Hittites at Kadesh reached a turning point, not through swords, but through words. Ramses II and the Hittite king, Hattusili III, agreed to what historians recognize as the first recorded peace treaty in human history. Written on silver tablets, it declared that neither empire would attack the other, and that both would aid one another if threatened by enemies or rebellions. This was not merely politics, it was survival, a recognition of mutual exhaustion after decades of war. To cement this unprecedented peace, Ramses II took a Hittite princess as his wife, strengthening the bond between the two once bitter enemies. This royal marriage was not only symbolic but also practical, intertwining bloodlines and forging unity between two of the greatest powers of the Bronze Age. For the Egyptians, it was propaganda of stability and greatness. For the Hittites, it was security in an age where empires crumbled under constant warfare. The treaty and royal marriage marked a shift in Ramses' reign. He had fought for glory, but he also understood the value of endurance. His vision was not only of conquest, but of legacy. Monuments that would outlast time, treaties that would echo across history, and alliances that demonstrated wisdom as much as power. Through diplomacy, Ramses carved a place in history not just as a warrior, but as a peacemaker. And yet, his hunger for eternity did not end here. As Ramses II grew older, his image transformed from warrior king into living deity. Temples across the Nile carved him seated among the gods, his features larger than life, his name etched deeper than any other. Priests declared him the chosen of Amun, the son of Ra, the one who kept chaos at bay. For the common Egyptian, Ramses was no longer just a man. He was the sun itself, eternal and unyielding, blazing across their lives with unmatched power. Among all his works, none symbolized Ramses' hunger for eternity more than Abu Simbel. Hewn from the mountains of Nubia, its 4 giant statues of Ramses towered like guardians of time, staring forever into the desert horizon. Twice a year, the sun aligned perfectly to pierce its sanctuary, illuminating his statue alongside the gods. It was no accident. It was mathematics, astronomy, and divine ambition merged into stone, a message to the universe. Ramses was eternal. Yet even a god-king cannot escape mortality. As Ramses entered his 9th decade of life, his body bore the weight of years of war, building, and rule. His hair turned white, his back bent, his jaw swollen from decades of dental disease. But still, he walked among his people, determined to project strength. The monument stood as his armor against death, a stone shield defying the passage of time. Ramses would not surrender easily, not to men and not to death itself. In his 91st year, Ramses II felt the weight of eternity pressing upon him. The man who had outlived his wives, his sons, his rivals, and even entire generations of his people, now stood at the threshold of death. In the twilight of his reign, he was no longer just Pharaoh, he was Egypt itself. His people whispered that as long as Ramses lived, the Nile would flood, the crops would grow, and the gods would protect their land. His final breath was not the end of a man, but the closing of an era. Upon his death, priests and embalmers prepared Ramses' body with the most sacred rites of Egypt. Oils, resins, and linen bound him tightly, sealing his flesh for the journey to the afterlife. His jaw, swollen in life, was bound shut with bandages. His hair, now white, was dyed with henna, returning him to youth. They placed amulets on his chest, scarabs of protection, and whispered spells from the Book of the Dead. Ramses was no longer man. He was Osiris reborn. But even the god-king could not escape time. Tomb robbers plundered his resting place, storms shattered his temples, and shifting sands buried his monuments. For centuries, Ramses lay forgotten, his colossal statues broken, his name fading from memory. The pharaoh who once sought to be eternal seemed lost to history. Yet destiny had another plan. His body, hidden by priests in a secret cache, survived while empires rose and fell. Ramses still waited. In 1881, deep within the cliffs of Deir el-Bahari, archaeologists uncovered a secret royal cache. Hidden there for millennia lay the mummies of Egypt's greatest pharaohs, and among them, Ramses II. His body, remarkably preserved, revealed the face of the man who had ruled the Nile for 66 years. The world was stunned. After 3,000 years, Ramses had returned from the shadows of history to reclaim his place as one of humanity's immortals. In 1976, Egypt granted Ramses II an honor no other pharaoh had received: a passport. His destination? Paris. The king who once commanded armies and built empires was flown across the Mediterranean, not as a relic, but as a dignitary. French scientists worked to save his body from decay, treating him with the same respect once reserved for living rulers. The ancient pharaoh walked once more among the living, proving that his name could never be erased. Today, Ramses II rests once again in Cairo, his body watched over by the nation he once ruled. Tourists gaze into the face of the man who defied time, who carved his story into stone, and who sought eternity, and against all odds achieved it. His monuments still tower, his name still inspires, and his legend still echoes across the ages. Ramses II did not merely rule Egypt, he became eternal. Ramses II dreamed of immortality. Through wars, temples, statues, and stories, he fought not only enemies but time itself. And in a way, he won. For more than 3,000 years after his death, his face, his monuments, and his name still live among us. But his story leaves us with a timeless question. Is true immortality carved in stone, or in the memory of those who continue to speak your name?